Being offended is a choice. How do you personally feel about that statement? Being offended is part of our emotional makeup. It's how people react to being offended that is the problem. I've been offended by things yet somehow didn't act out and throw a temper tantrum. I imagine most people are like this. However, the vocal minority who cause chaos if anything slightly offends their delicate emotions who are the problem. So, no, being offended is not a choice. How you react to being offended is definitely a choice. I think my reaction is a choice. Fuck your mother. Are you offended? You decide. I'm offended by this statement. I believe that offense is ultimately taken, not given. But it can also be intended, and those are two different things which are both important in determining the most suitable reaction. I can be offended by something that was not intended to offend me, and assuming it wasn't said done with careless disregard, it's not really a problem. Just clear it up and move on. But I can also not be offended by something which was intended to cause such feelings, and in that case it still makes sense to address those intentions as being bad. Being offended isn't a choice, but the reaction to being offended is a choice. It doesn't change that something offensive happened. Offensive is offense, an attack. It's up to a person to decipher if it was intentional or incidental and if it's worth following up on. But anyone who utters this statement seriously is 99.9% guaranteed to be a whole-ass shitbag who thinks other people's pain is humorous and fair game until someone targets their fragility for the same purpose. The only real choice in all of this is the choice to be offensive in the first place, because everything else is merely reactive with a narrowing set of responses. If you offend me and I laugh it off, that doesn't mean I wasn't offended, it just means I'm not engaging with you. Being offended is usually involuntary. Deciding that others need to care about you being offended, that's a choice and sometimes an obnoxiously wrong one. Just because you're offended, doesn't mean you're right. Ricky Gervais. You can feel however you want, but no one else needs to know or care about it. Being offended is an emotional response. Your reaction is largely your choice, depending on your emotional maturity and current state of mind. Offending someone on purpose, using words that are generally agreed upon to be offensive, insulting, after a person told you it was offensive, is very much a choice though. How dare you tell me it's a choice? But seriously, it is. I think it's wrong. How you handle your feelings are your choice, but don't lie to yourself and act like you don't experience them. It's true. I've never been offended in my life, so I agree. It's kinda true, but not really how emotions actually work. Being offended is a reaction. Telling the world is a choice. True to a certain extent. My English teacher told me that in life we consciously decide how we react to things, and it's so true. You insult the way I look, I can either have a tantrum and start a fight and God knows what that could lead to, or I can internalize the statement and understand that not everyone is going to like what I'm wearing. I'll just move on. I'm at a point where I get secondhand embarrassment from people who try to bully or insult people. A secure and happy person with purpose will never put other people down. The emotion is very real, but how we react to it is within our control. But we generally suck at that part. It's just true. Sometimes reacting to it is right, but it is still a choice. Personally, I think that being offended is a choice. I think that the way society is set up these days, people expect everyone to get mad over the little things, as well as being offended. I'm not saying that people can't hurt other people's feelings. I'm saying that people get pissed off by others' personal opinions. And that is a little much. I think that when people are giving opinions and you're offended, you are either caught off guard and feel targeted, which is going to happen in life. I don't think that purposely making fun of someone or targeting them is okay. I just think that sometimes people need a little tough love and the truth needs to be said. But like I said, this is my personal opinion. Sounds like something likely said by assholes to try to excuse being an awful person. Kids have too much choice these days. Shakes fist angrily at the clouds. It is. If you generally don't care about others' opinions, until those opinions are offensive, and you then choose to be offended by them, then being offended is a choice. It makes a pretty fair point. Anyone who says that is almost certainly saying that as an excuse to talk shit about you or others and get defensive when you understandably get upset. They're actually saying, "You chose to tell me I'm an asshole, that makes you an asshole." Being offended about dumb stuff is definitely a choice. Arguable. If you're clearly joking and intend no harm, yes. If you're serious, no. Being offensive is a choice and you're just butthurt you can no longer do it unbothered. It's mostly true. But your reaction is also a choice, and that's more important. It's as valid as being in any emotional state is a choice. Is it a choice to be mad, scared, etc.? It's dumb. The amount of emotional suppression that's expected from people is ridiculous. I would say that if you're offended or uncomfortable or experiencing most negative emotions, it's worth examining why instead of immediately acting on it. Check out Aussie comedian Steve Hughes on YouTube. He has a brilliant set on being offended. It does seem that some people tend to get more offended when that status stands to gain them something in a social institution. It depends. Being offended can be a choice. For example, whoever went out of their way to act hurt by the Trader Jose brand at Trader Joe's definitely went out of their way to be offended. Pretty much every story about someone being offended by something in the culture is an exaggeration. If someone is offended by something someone said right in front of them, then that might be genuine. I'm offended. It's now very common to hear people say, "I am rather offended by that," as if that gives them certain rights. It's actually nothing more than the whine. I find that offensive. It has no meaning. It has no purpose. It has no reason to be respected as a phrase. I am offended by that. Well, so fucking what? Stephen Fry. It's true. Whatever it is, there's people on the planet that like it, support it, are indifferent about it or feel offended, even disgusted about it. That does not mean being offended is always wrong, but you can evaluate what you get offended about and if feeling the offense and the upsetness that comes with it and make a conscious decision to quickly or slowly move away from it. You make that decision. Most of the time you get offended innocently, but it still is a choice not to. I am choosing not to be offended by this. A very wise man once told me, "You can decide how you feel. These are your emotions and you are in control of them. If you are not, take back the control. If I get up and think it's gonna be a shitty day, I just decide it's gonna be a good day and my perspective switches." Always wait for the thought that comes to your mind when you are offended, attacked. The 1 comes from the part of your brain that's controlled by instincts. The 2 is the sulky child living in your brain. The 3 comes from the rational part of your mind. Always wait for the 3. You are benefiting in several ways. There is a small break and both can gather themselves and allow it to switch to a more rational discussion. You always think before you speak and you only hurt PPL if you really want to and you don't have to apologize all the time. PC, your emotions got the better of you. Apologizing does only minimize the harm you already did. Thinking before speaking out loud prevents you from hurting PPL you don't want to hurt in the first place. Also, it allows you to be the bigger person, and especially in a professional setting, you will be seen as very mature and you gain respect, and most likely promotions. It's mostly true. It's heavily dependent on cultural and societal standards and how easily anchored the individual person is. It will probably also change over time. You can call someone a cunt and get different reactions in Australia, the UK, and the US. You can call someone a cracker and be met with anger, confusion, or laughter. In places like NYC, getting told to fuck off is just another day, but would be fighting words in rural places. Yes, getting offended is an emotional response from the person, but the trigger for that emotion is not set in stone. It changes based on the person's thinking, like how they believe that statement should be interpreted, exposure, etc. and emotional state. So because of how malleable your trigger is, I think it is essentially a choice. Obviously your reaction to becoming offended is entirely a choice too. Yep, go red. The courage to be disliked. It is except when it isn't. If you insult me, I can choose to give way to your words and how or if I might respond to your words. If you do something that is objectively provocative, like sending dick pics to my children, you are probably not going to enjoy my reaction, but you can be assured that I am offended by yours. It's a great excuse to not treat people with basic dignity. I don't think being offended is a choice any more than being surprised or frightened or angry is a choice. How you handle any of the above is the choice, not their existence. It's a choice until it isn't. It depends. You can't choose when to have emotions, no. Just when you want to display them. I can be the happiest I've ever felt in years and not crack a smile. But I still feel it. If you don't, you might be lying. Probably even to yourself. And if you're not lying, you might have a problem that requires insight from a therapist. Emotions are not a choice. How you react to feeling them is causing offense is also a choice. It's a two-way thing. I think it depends a lot on context. It can be useful to remember that you can't control other people, only your reaction to them. But if they're doing something like trying to deny you rights, it seems a bit dismissive to say being offended is a choice you're making. It's true. People take offense, but no one actually gives it 100%. You can stand anything if you are mature enough. I have lived almost my entire life disagreeing with almost everything around me, but that is an indication of how well I have the potential to socialize with others. Whether I do or not is a choice, as I have to make the effort. I don't have to agree with people in order to have relationships with others. Irrespective of what is occurring, you are 100% responsible about how to respond to that situation. And number X200B. No one bothers to ask why they are offended. Think of it this way. Until you came along there was no problem, because when you are offended by something, it means you are the one with the problem. Literally and figuratively. Everyone around you is a mirror. Also, as if shutting the fuck up was never an option. It's 100% accurate. Being offensive is more of a choice than being offended. If people could control their emotions, we'd be much better off. It's how we handle them. That said, that's an asinine statement. It depends. It's kind of like saying, don't let others influence your happiness, or, don't let people live rent-free in your mind. I think there are some truths to it. My billions-year-old, genetically controlled amygdala and limbic system, common to all mammals, calls bullshit on that statement. Being offended is a choice. It's usually something we choose to do over our own personal moral ideas. Getting offended is simply how people express their disapproval of an idea. What's wrong with being offended? How is being offended not a choice? Being offended, emotions. We struggle to, or cannot effectively control emotion. Acting on those emotions, however, that we can control. Being considerate or respectful is a choice. If people did this more, the question of offense would happen less. Nah. This kind of statement is an attempt to justify being an asshole and dismissing all accountability. Hateful and hurtful people need to reflect on what they do. Otherwise, it's like saying, I just punched you. It's up to you as to whether or not it hurts. I don't think I agree with that statement necessarily, but offense is taken, not given. If something offends me, it's my problem, not someone else's. If you aren't up to date on global military and financial current affairs, there is going to be more to be worried about than feeling offended or a statement about it. Eleanor Roosevelt. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Be kind to yourself. It's the truth, and it's also extremely difficult to accept. The truth is usually like that anyway. Whether or not you skip a meal so you can afford to feed your children is a choice. Not going to the dentist to avoid financial ruin is a choice. Working 3 jobs so you can afford your rent hike is a choice. Not all choices are the result of your responsibility. There are situations where taking offense is warranted and situations where taking offense would be foolish. But that's a case-by-case basis that requires nuance. This is a rather pointless expression, as you'll only ever use it, regardless of intent, in a situation where you did cause offense, and a rebuttal to that offense. It's not a statement. It's a criticism. In my experience, this saying, being offended is a choice, usually comes from the person causing offense rather than the one taking it. Typically to avoid the consequences. Whether that is minor, a joke was made but didn't provoke the expected reaction, or something more serious. I always say this: resentment is a poison that slowly kills you. By answering or holding a grudge, you poison others. Sounds like a bullshit excuse assholes would use. This is such a loaded question. I think being an asshole is a choice. No. The choice is how you deal with it. Wrong. As others have said, it's a reaction. Also pointless observation. Why would it matter if it was a choice? It's not a choice, it's an emotion. And just like choices, you can't impose emotions on people. I don't think being offended is a choice, however the choice lies in your response. You can move on from it or you can react based on feelings. I can't believe you just said that. In the moment it's not a choice, but ***, being easily offended or hard to offend are dispositions you can cultivate ***. Some people, usually inadvertently, prime themselves to being offended until they are on a hair trigger. Others cultivate a stoic disposition that help them to not be offended. Offending is a thing someone does to someone else, not necessarily intentionally. Accidental offense is common. You don't choose to be offended any more than you choose to be rear-ended by another car at a stoplight. Whatever emotional response you have to that is reflex built by a lifetime of experiences and expectations, so you don't exactly control that either, though you can influence it with a lot of work. What you do in response to the offense and how you handle your emotional response, that's your choice. Usually, people who say that being offended is a choice are trying to duck responsibility for how their own words or actions affected someone else. Hopefully they will learn to play well with others. Not saying offensive things is an easier choice and a good way to avoid being punched in the mouth. I think Stephen Fry summed it up perfectly. It's now very common to hear people say, "I am rather offended by that," as if that gives them certain rights. It's actually nothing more than a whine. I find that offensive. It has no meaning. It has no purpose. It has no reason to be respected as a phrase. I am offended by that. Well, so fucking what? 100% depends on the situation. Someone looks me straight in the eye and calls me a twat. I am offended, and I will tell them. I see a young boy wearing a dress. I'm a brainless bigot and it offends me, but I chose to keep it to myself because my own personal choices and life are not being impacted by this. See, my wife decides to cut her toenails in the bed and then flick them out of the open window into the garden. I'm offended, confused and unsure how to respond. I make an Reddit post. Choosing to say things you know will offend people on purpose makes you an asshole. And you don't get to be offended when people treat you for who you are. An asshole. No, because when I'm offended, I don't want to be offended, I just am. If I had a choice, I would never choose to be offended. Bullshit victim blaming and only ever said by bullies and dickheads. Being offended by a trans person's face on a beer can is a choice. A stupid choice, no doubt. It's not possible to not offend someone else. Are you an LGBTQ ally? Then you're offending religious zealots. Voting for Republicans? Then you're offending progressives. Using racial slurs? Then you are offending anyone who is not a nitwit. The response to being offended is where choice comes into play. Some responses are wholly justified even if they seem extreme. Ignoring actually offensive things is more problematic. Sometimes people give offense to test boundaries. If you have none, then you'll get steamrollered. And many times speaking up is the right thing to do. Personally, I'd rather make the right choice to uphold my values than be silent and give my tacit approval to something toxic like bigotry. But you need to choose your battles and not waste your energy. Being offended is not a choice. Choosing how to act in offenses. Example, when my stepmom died from cancer. If I heard a kid say, "She didn't give me a big present last year, she deserved it," I would be offended as hell. But I'm not going to yell at a kid at her funeral and make a scene. Being offended isn't a choice, but it's also pretty meaningless. Anyone could be offended by anything. Yusuu Naito. That statement is part of the Magaverse. I mean, it's technically true, but it's a bullshit statement. Like, yeah, I'm gonna choose to be offended if you call my mom a whore. Freedom of speech means you can say whatever you want, not that your words are immune to the responsibility of their meaning. It means you're not gonna get arrested for saying that you hate people who are differently abled. But I sure as shit wouldn't walk into the Special Olympics dropping hard RS, because people will rightfully choose to be offended and kick my ass. The statement, "being offended is a choice," is just another way for people to be willfully ignorant. It's a passive-aggressive way of trying to circumvent what I just described. Namely, I'm special and my lips should retain unfettered access to words that fall off of my brain like a rusty tap. What kind of second-grade bullshit is that? Was the babysitter choosing to get offended because you called her a poo-poo head? Yeah, she was, because words matter. Pretending like freedom of speech is an issued press pass rather than a protected virtue is either willfully ignorant or genuinely selfish.